We lost our history. We see ourselves from the Western perspective. We are the descendants of the original migrant. India became the first original founders zone of the out of Africa migration. Is the question of who are the Indian people?
Welcome to Sanatani, where we explore the eternal wisdom of Sanatan Dharma and its relevance today through relatable stories, facts, and discussions. Today we have the renowned geopolitical analyst, writer, and scientist, Mr. Abhijit Chavda. A popular figure in the digital space, Mr. Chavda is known to simplify the complex historical and scientific facts in his own unique manner. Welcome, Mr. Chavda.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, today's conversation is absolutely important for us because we have been talking about Bharat, the history of Bharat and the civilization of Bharat very much from a Western lens, right? How do you think that changes when we see it from the perspective of Bharat?
Yes, you are absolutely right. We see ourselves from the Western perspective. This has been ingrained into us. Our education system does that to us. So our history, we used to have our own history books and all that, but those were all destroyed during the destruction of the Indian universities 1,000 years ago. Nalanda was burned and Takshashila and so many, Telhara, Shardapet and so on. So we lost our history, our written history. Whatever was left had to be passed on orally. Then the British arrived here and they declared that Indians are a people who are without history. They don't record their history. And then they proceeded to write our history for us. And that's what we are taught. Okay. And that system still continues today. So it's a very Western-centric worldview that we get from the education system. So we see ourselves from that perspective. But if we actually critique that, if we think critically, then there's a lot of gaps and lots of distortions that become evident if you think critically. And what our textbooks, what our professors never address is the question of who are the Indian people? Where did we come from? What is our origin? Right? And what were our ancestors like? Maybe 2,000 years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, what were our ancestors like? What was their lifestyle like? What did they do? What kind of cuisine did they have? What kind of clothing did they have? What were their hopes, aspirations and all that? Nothing. We have absolutely no idea. So if we look at the Indian history from our perspective, it becomes very different very quickly. Now, if you want to address the question of who are the Indian people, what's our origin? So we have to go back about 80,000 years. Okay, we're starting about 80,000 years ago. Okay. So the best evidence that we have, scientific evidence, archaeological evidence, says that the origin of Homo sapiens was in Africa. Okay, the oldest evidence of Homo sapiens is in a cave called Jebel Irhoud or something in North Africa. That's about 400,000 years before today. And the non-African humans, Homo sapiens, they originate apparently from a single migration out of Africa, which happened between 80 and 60,000 years ago, roughly. Okay, I'm giving you a rough idea. And this migration happened across the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb, which is a very strategic geopolitical choke point even today. It connects the Arabian Sea with the Red Sea. Okay. So this migration was a small group of people, maybe 300 people, maybe 1,000 people, not more than that. A small group of people migrated out of Africa. And then they followed the coastline of Yemen. There may have been another crossing of the sea around the Strait of Hormuz. So around that time, if you look at the geography of the region today, it's all desert. It's all barren. But in those days, during the time this happened, there were these stretches of greenery across around the coastal regions. So that's why they followed the green. And they eventually went further east and ended up in India. And India was this place, the Indian subcontinent was this place where you had this gigantic landmass which could sustain as many people as you wanted. Because it was fertile, it was green, it was forested, it was wooded, it had plenty of everything you need to sustain a human population. So India became the first original founders zone of the out of Africa migration. And it's from India that people spread all across the world. And this is borne out through genetic analysis. Haplogroup F. What's a haplogroup? It's essentially a lineage. It's a genetic lineage. So we have DNA in our body, in our cells. DNA is software that determines how we're going to be. So if we look at DNA, it mutates over time. And you can actually calculate the rate of mutations. So based on that, you can actually determine who our ancestors are and all that. So a haplogroup is essentially a large collection of people who all share a single common ancestor with a single genetic mutation.
Interesting.
Okay? So if we look at the haplogroups that we have in the world today, the oldest non-African haplogroup is called patrilineal haplogroup. Okay, there are two kinds of haplogroups, Y chromosomal haplogroups and mitochondrial DNA haplogroups. So mitochondrial DNA is DNA that is passed on from mother to children.
Okay.
So only daughters actually pass it on because males can't pass it on.
Okay.
And Y chromosomal haplogroup DNA is passed on from father to son only.
Okay.
So haplogroup F is the oldest non-African patrilineal haplogroup. It originated in the Indian subcontinent about 65,000 years before today.
Okay.
And 95% of non-African males are descendants of this one haplogroup. So they are all descendants of one human being, one man who lived in the Indian subcontinent between 60 and 65 roughly 1,000 years ago. The oldest matrilineal haplogroups, haplogroup M and N, also originated right here in the subcontinent about 60, 70, 80,000 years before today. Okay, we don't know exactly when, but that's the rough thing. The Indian subcontinent was the original founder zone of the out of Africa migration.
Yeah.
And we here who live in India today, we are the descendants of the original migrants. Okay, so that's the beginning point, that's the starting point of this conversation. We are the original it is here in the subcontinent, and from here that they spread all across the world.
Okay.
Westwards, eastwards, wherever. They went into China, they went into Mongolia, they went to Siberia, they went to Europe, and so on and so forth. Now there are other haplogroups that have emerged later. One of the most successful haplogroups is called R-M17, or it's also called R1A1A.
Okay.
And this is the haplogroup that seems to correspond to the places in the world where you have the spread of Indo-European languages.
Okay.
Indo-European languages, the oldest of them, it is not Hittite or whatever, it is Sanskrit, the oldest Indo-European language. So our people, they settled in the subcontinent, and we have been living here for tens of thousands of years.
Right.
Essentially since the migration happened, about 60,000 years ago, until now. So that's how old our presence has been in the subcontinent. We have evolved over time. If you look at archaeological evidence, you find people from the Ganga basin, the Narmada valley, and you find skeletons that are like 30,000 years old. And those skeletons happen to be about 6 feet tall on average.
Right.
And they had various kinds of instruments and weapons and things. Then another thing we find is that, it is said, our textbooks tell us, that agriculture emerged in the Fertile Crescent, which is the region between the two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Okay, it's in Mesopotamia, in West Asia. That's what your textbooks will tell you. That's what all the books tell you. Now, if you look at evidence of agriculture in the subcontinent, you'll find that, about between 25 to 10,000 years ago, there was the Ice Age. Roughly I'm giving you. So during the Ice Age, the world was frozen. A lot of the world was frozen, and the sea levels were about 150 meters below where they are today. Okay. Because of that, India and Sri Lanka were one landmass. That was the original subcontinent. And if you look at the evidence of agriculture, you find that the oldest evidence of the cultivation of plants is found in what's called the Horton Plains National Park in Sri Lanka. Okay. It's about 17 to 18,000 years old. And you have more evidence of agriculture in India, in the subcontinent, that dates back about 13,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and so on. So India was the place where agriculture was first discovered, invented, whatever you want to call it, way before the so-called Fertile Crescent agricultural revolution. So in India, we have people who have been cultivating plants way before the rest of the world started doing that. So that's another thing our textbooks don't teach us.
Sir, what do you think is the reason that the whole events of history has changed entirely, right? Like what you are telling us and the audience today comes from a lot of scientific analysis, a lot of research work that we have done over a period of time, right? But why do you think it took us so long to come to this place? Who do you think is responsible for, changing the whole space of facts or changing the facts entirely?
Yeah, good question. Scientific research happens all the time. Archaeological research happens all the time. And you are always finding something new. And when it comes to a place like the Indian subcontinent, there's so much that we are yet to discover. So you have new discoveries happening all the time, and they reshape our understanding of the world. They show us new facts, which now replace the old understanding that we have. But that has to make its way into textbooks.
Right.
And in the Indian education system, nothing ever changes. That's the issue. That's why we are taught this outdated information. Some of it dates back to the 19th century. Okay, that sort of thing. Our education system is not agile. It's very bureaucratic. And that's why the new information doesn't come into the picture. For example, we have the great Dr. B.B. Lal, who was in the 20th century, the head of the ASI, Archaeological Survey of India. And he did so much research, and he published more than, 50 books or something. But somehow, none of his discoveries made its way into our textbooks, ever.
Okay. So, sir, for example, say I'm somebody who has not been aware about the history and evolution of Bharat, right? And so has the younger generation. What would be the baselines for us to start understanding Bharat? Okay.
So we got an idea of the fact that we are the oldest population outside of Africa. Now, when it comes to our civilization, what we find, if you look at it factually, is that we are the oldest surviving civilization. We are the oldest continuously existing civilization on the surface of the planet. Now, the question is, how old is our civilization, right? Today, we have certain cultural, for example, you're wearing a bindi, right? And ladies, especially not in the metropolitan cities, but in rural India, etc., they will wear the sindoor in their mang, right? You will find ladies in Rajasthan, Gujarat who wear these big ivory bangles all across the arms and so on. We have the worship of various gods and goddesses. Lord Shiva is a very famous one, very prominent one, and so on. So we have certain cultural manifestations and religious manifestations that are prevalent in the country today. Now, if we go back in time, the question is, how far back in time do we find the same cultural manifestations in the archaeological record? And the answer is about 9,500 years. So, we know about the so-called Indus Valley civilization.
Yes.
And we are taught that it was a civilization that existed in western and northern India a long time ago, and then it vanished. And then somehow magically we appeared here. That's what we are taught.
Correct.
Now, if we look at the cultural evidence that is manifested in the archaeological record of the so-called Indus Valley civilization, we find the same things. We find ladies wearing bindi. We find ladies with mang mein sindoor. We find ladies wearing those big bangles, ivory bangles. We find the worship of Lord Shiva all across the place. We find Shivalingas. We find swastikas. It is the same culture. The head of the ASI back in the British times, who didn't discover, but he claimed to discover, I think his name was Marshall or something. Okay, he was an Englishman. He said that the culture of the so-called Harappan era is so manifest, I'm paraphrasing it, but he's saying it is essentially the same as the culture that's found in India today. Okay, even today, in the 21st century. So there is cultural continuity.
Right.
So what that tells us, before I go further deeper into history, what this tells us is that this so-called Indus Valley civilization or Harappan civilization, that was us. It was us. It never went away.
Yeah.
Now we'll go deeper into that. So I said that our culture seems to go back about 9,500 years, and now recently they found more evidence in the Kutch or something, which takes it back 12,000 years.
Okay.
So our civilization is at least 12,000 years old. So the oldest site of this period, archaeological site, is in Bhirranna. It's in Haryana. Okay, and it's been carbon dated to being about 9,500 years ago, old. So at least that's how old this period for history was. And the peak of this period, the Harappan period, was about 3000 or so BC, when you had this gigantic metropolitan network across India. These big cities laid out in grid structures, okay, better planned than today's cities, Mumbai, etc., with better drainage systems and better town planning than today's cities. And you had this all across India, all across northern and western India, stretching from Maharashtra all the way to essentially Ladakh, and all the way westwards to the borders of Iran, or borders of Persia, and eastwards into Madhya Pradesh. A gigantic area, which is larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia put together.
Oh, wow.
Okay? This was a time of extremely advanced civilization. You had tremendously effective town planning, very aesthetic towns. I mean, today we think of these Harappan sites as brown, right? And barren.
Yeah.
It was all green back in the day because there used to be a river there, a gigantic river that flowed all the way from the Himalayas to to Saurashtra, to Kutch. That was the Saraswati. And this river has been termed as a mythical river.
Yeah.
Even today, I mean, yesterday I saw some newspaper clipping which says that the mythical Saraswati, they are trying to find it. You can see the evidence of the Paleo channel in satellite images, the ancient channel. And in northern India, the river still exists. And it's called the Ghaggar Hakra.
Oh.
Yeah. And it still exists. It is now a monsoon-fed river because of tectonic changes. The ice melt flow into the river kind of dried out over time.
Okay.
So it was always a rain-fed river, the Saraswati. It is mentioned in the Rig Veda. Okay. Now the question is, how old is the Rig Veda? Because that is essentially the oldest text that we have, the Rig Veda. The oldest of the Vedic texts. So we find that the Rig Veda mentions the Saraswati.
Okay.
It mentions the Saraswati so many times. And it mentions the Saraswati as a loudly roaring river, as the mother of floods, and so on. It mentions the Saraswati. I mean, if you see the mentions and the way the river is mentioned, it is clearly a river that was in its prime.
Okay.
It was not a river in decline. Now you have research papers in Nature, etc., the most prominent research paper in the world, research journal in the world. So you have papers, research published there in Nature that show that the Saraswati did exist, first of all, okay, and it was last in its prime about 6000 BC.
Okay.
And then the Indian rainy season started declining monotonically, because of which the river slowly started subsiding, and the river kind of dried out in the southern half around 1500 BC.
Okay.
So now, if you have the Rig Veda mentioning a river, which is a loudly roaring river, or the mother of floods, clearly it is mentioning a river in its prime.
Yeah.
It's not mentioning a river that's drying out.
Yeah.
So it indicates that the Rig Veda must have been composed, I would say, closer to 6000 BC than to 1500 BC.
Correct.
So 6000 BC is 8000 years before today. So that is at least how old the Rig Veda is. And then you have the other books of the Vedic period, the other sacred texts. So the Rig Veda is the oldest literary text in human history.
Correct.
Okay, and if you look at the depiction of Indian society in the Rig Vedic time, it's a pastoral society, it's a rural society, agricultural society. There are no great towns, there are no cities, there's nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
And the currency is cows. Okay, the cow was the unit of currency. A man who is wealthy has lots of cows and that sort of thing. So that kind of indicates why we don't kill cows or eat cows. I mean, why would you eat your currency or kill your currency? That sort of thing. And of course, cows have this gentle, nice nature, which is why we kind of regard them as divine animals and so on. So the Rig Veda seems to have been written around 6000 BC or closer to that.
Okay.
And then you have the other Vedic period and so on. And you have lineages of kings that are mentioned, lineages of hundreds of kings, a whole bunch of kings and so on. And so on. So, and then the question is, so if you look at the textbooks, if you look at the accepted version of history, now we're getting into controversial territory because it says that there was an Aryan invasion of India.
Right.
Right? So, according to this theory, which was propounded by Max Muller in the 1800s, according to this theory, India, Bharat, the subcontinent, was the original inhabitants were dark-skinned people. The so-called Dravidian race, a separate race, okay?
Yeah.
The so-called Dravidian race, dark-skinned people, they were the original inhabitants, and they were the people who made this Harappan culture, okay? Not the white people. And then around 1500 BC, according to the Aryan invasion theory, a bunch of white people came into India via the Khyber Pass or something. They came from Central Asia or Europe. They were white-skinned people, and they came to India carrying Hinduism and Sanskrit into India. And then they conquered the nice civilized people, the black people. They oppressed them, subjugated them, and forced them to migrate down south. And then they sat down and composed the Rig Veda on the banks in the Sapta Sindhu region, Punjab region. And they imposed the evil Hinduism and caste system and the evil Sanskrit language on India. Okay, that is what we are taught in school, in college, wherever. That is the accepted version of history, Aryan invasion. Now the question is, if you think critically, then if there was an invasion and all that, there will be traces of that in the archaeological record.
Right.
You will find a sudden change in the cultural manifestation in the archaeological record. Sudden change of culture. And you will also find evidence of massacres and battles and wars and all that, burned cities and whatnot. You find nothing.
Right.
Archaeologists have been searching for more than a century for evidence of an invasion. There is not a shred. Okay, otherwise it would be published all over the place.
Correct.
So they could not find, they're still looking for it, they still haven't found it.
Yeah.
So no shred, no trace of an invasion. So then the Aryan invasion theory was modified. How was it modified? They said that it was actually a migration.
Okay.
So the Aryan invasion theory has now become the Aryan migration theory. So it says that there were multiple pulses of slow migrations into India. But even then, if that happened, where is the archaeological record that shows that there was a change in culture and this new culture came in?
Yeah.
Right? So once again, the Aryan migration theory fails. So eventually they will say there was a tourism. And then there was a picnic. So Aryan tourism theory, Aryan picnic theory. My point is...
Just kept getting evolved and evolved from a white man's lens.
Exactly. And we have our academics and our intellectuals who still keep on pushing this theory despite there being no shred of evidence for it.
Yeah.
Now they are going into the genetic domain. They are trying to say that the Indian genetics have come from outside, and so there's evidence of a little bit of genetic input from outside.
Okay.
Look, when you have a civilization across a whole subcontinent, which is it was superb, super prosperous, extremely prosperous. There was no place in the world like India back in the time. So when you have such a prosperous place, doesn't everybody want to come there? I mean, today everybody wants to go to the US, right?
Yeah,
for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So back in the day, everybody wanted to come to the subcontinent. So obviously you will have migrants coming in and their DNA getting assimilated into the population. So that is being shown as an evidence of a migration.
Right.
But the point is that the central claims of the Aryan invasion migration myth are twofold.
Okay.
Okay, they try to use the genetic arguments to mask what they're truly claiming. The true central claims are twofold. Firstly, Hinduism is foreign to India.
Yeah.
Secondly, Sanskrit is foreign to India.
Right.
These are the two central claims. And let them prove it. They're never going to be able to prove it. Because it all originated here.
Do you think that's still something that they're still trying to do and still trying to, whitewash it?
It's an ongoing battle. It's
Right.
an ongoing battle, back and forth, back and forth. But they are trying to go down the genetic route now because there is no evidence of Sanskrit or Hinduism being foreign to India. And if you look at the record, you will find that Hinduism, and all the manifestations of Hinduism go back 8,000-9,000 years. Now there's one more evidence, one more thing we have to look into. The language. What was the language that was spoken during the so-called Harappan era, Saraswati Sindhu era? So we have the script, right? The script. The Indus Valley script, so-called, right? That people have deciphered the cuneiform script of Persia, the hieroglyphics of Egypt. They've deciphered all kinds of scripts, but somehow the Harappan script has not been deciphered until now. So there is a computer scientist called, his name is Bharat Rao.
Okay.
He recently used cryptographic methodology to decipher the Indus Valley script. Now the man is from Karnataka, and he has demonstrated that this was late Vedic Sanskrit.
Interesting.
Okay, so if they spoke, and anybody is free to try and disprove it. He has done it through cryptographic methodology, which actually you can't disprove. Okay, and he's put the whole findings and the whole methodology online. Anybody is welcome to go and disprove it if they can, if they dare. Not possible. So the language that was spoken during the Harappan era was late Vedic Sanskrit.
Okay.
Okay. So that kind of demolishes the Aryan invasion theory because the Harappan era goes back all the way 8,000-9,000 years, which indicates Sanskrit did not come from outside.
Correct.
Right. Then the question is, how did the Indo-European languages spread? If we ask ourselves, what are the Indo-European languages? Well, we have Sanskrit, obviously. We have all the Indian languages. Persian is an Indo-European language.
Okay.
Persian or Farsi, friends, cousins. And then you have languages like German, French, all the European languages are also part of the Indo-European family. Latin is one of the oldest ones and so on. Now the question is, if this is the case, if we are the oldest Indo-European people, then how did the languages spread outside of India, right? For interesting facts and stories about Indian culture and civilization and history, please follow the Sanatani channel.